I didn't notice the note at first. I noticed the silence. The clink of cutlery slowed. My mother-in-law's eyes sharpened. My son's hand brushed my coat pocket and vanished like he'd touched a flame. Then paper, white, torn, fluttered once in her fist. "Ignore him," she said, smiling too fast. She ripped it cleanly, like she'd practiced. The pieces disappeared into her napkin. I swallowed. The room exhaled. Dinner resumed, but something stayed lodged behind my ribs. Later, in the bathroom, I locked the door and spread the torn fragments across the sink. My hands were steady. They always get steady when I know I'm being lied to. 4 pieces fit, then 5, then the corner I hadn't seen. The message emerged, crooked but urgent. The rest was gone. I raised my head and stared at my reflection. I'd worn that face for years, calm, agreeable, grateful, the face people use to underestimate you. I didn't confront anyone. I tucked the pieces into my wallet and kissed my son goodnight longer than usual. He held on like he was counting seconds. That was the last normal moment. I married into that family believing in courtesy masquerading as kindness. My mother-in-law called it tradition. My wife called it support. I called it love because it felt safer than questioning the weight of their expectations pressing into my back. They paid for holidays. They offered help. They corrected me gently, publicly. I learned to nod, to defer, to let decisions pass over my head like weather. Except with my son. With him, I was precise, present, unmovable. That's what changed everything. The first sign was the paperwork. Forms arriving already signed, accounts I didn't remember opening, my name used like a spare key. When I asked questions, answers came pre-packaged and sweet. Family takes care of family. The second sign was the way my son watched doors. Children notice patterns adults dismiss. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't panic either. Panic is loud. I went quiet. By morning, I had a list. Bank statements, property records, a timeline. I called in sick and drove past places I'd never noticed before. Storage units, offices with no signage, a lawyer's building 3 blocks off the main road. I started recording everything. Screenshots, dates, voices. I learned which rooms echoed and which didn't. I learned how often my phone tried to connect to networks I hadn't joined. At dinner, I laughed at the right moments. I let her pour the wine. I let her correct my pronunciation of my own name, and I watched my son. He slipped notes everywhere, drawers, shoes, under plates, small warnings, small truths. He'd overheard calls, seen envelopes exchanged, heard my name used like collateral. I never acknowledged the notes. That was our code. I gathered evidence for 6 weeks. I let them think the pressure was working. I let them believe the signatures they forged would never be questioned. I let the lies stack high enough to cast a shadow. When I was ready, I drove to the police station. The desk sergeant asked me to wait. The chairs were bolted to the floor. A television murmured the news. I counted breaths. Then the chief officer stepped out. I said my name. He went pale, not confused, not curious, pale. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice, "do not leave." I laid the folder on the counter. It opened like a confession. Deeds transferred without consent. Accounts drained in structured withdrawals. A trust altered. A shell company registered to a cousin who'd never had a job. "And this," I said, sliding the final page forward, "is the recorded call where she explains how to keep him compliant." The chief didn't touch the paper. He looked at me instead. Then he nodded once and turned to his officers. "Secure the room." The execution was quiet. That's the mistake people make. They expect revenge to roar. Search warrants went out before dinner. Accounts froze before dessert. A custody review was filed before bedtime. My phone stayed silent, while theirs exploded. The confrontation happened in the living room they'd curated to intimidate me. Leather, glass, framed photos of generosity. My mother-in-law spoke first. She always did. "You've misunderstood," she said, already reaching for control. This is a family matter." The officer read the charges. Her smile cracked on the word forgery, shattered on coercion, fell apart entirely at child endangerment. My wife cried, not for me, for the image collapsing. My son stood beside me, small and straight. He didn't look at them, he looked at the door. When the cuffs clicked, it sounded like punctuation. After, there were statements, forms, quiet rooms that smelled of coffee and consequence. My son fell asleep in a chair, his head against my arm. I signed nothing without reading it. I answered only what was asked. Precision is mercy, for yourself. Weeks later, the house was quieter, not empty, clean. I took my son to the park. He ran ahead, fearless again.